It's all about realignment and it's all about schedules this time of year and this particular year because of what's coming to the Big Ten, of course, in 2024. Welcome in, everyone. Iowa Hawkeyes live right here at the Voice of College Football. And of course, we get together with Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm here each and every week. Corey, thank you so much for adjusting the time this week and making this work. This is the one day I had to cram in 6 live streams to get my schedule in for the week. And I know you're not feeling 100%, but thanks for being here.
Just fighting a bit of a early summer cold, Mark, and I guess this is the time to fight it when it's like the slowest time of the year sports-wise. At least for me, I know the NBA Finals are underway, and I'm not an anti-NBA guy. I guess I would probably root for the Nuggets if I was watching that series. But yeah, pretty slow time of the year with Iowa baseball now in the books, and we've got some big news dropping tomorrow. I'm anxious to get your thoughts on what could be dropping from the Big Ten as far as format. They didn't go into a lot of detail. I didn't get any press. I'm signed up for Big Ten press releases. I didn't get a formal release about exactly what they'll be detailing. But based on the tweet that was sent out by the Big Ten Network earlier today, I would guess that we're at least going to get a pretty good idea of what Iowa's schedule will look like. Of course, the entire Big Ten, the new schedule model and opponents. So does that mean there are no divisions? I mean, I don't know what that means, So
I'm going to put together what was stated earlier this week by Tony Petitti, and I did not see the interview with, I believe it was Rich Eisen and or Dan Patrick. So I'm taking this secondhand. Did not see the interview myself. But a couple of the bullet points, yes, did include a reference to no divisions. Not necessarily that he said, we've determined there will be no divisions, but the way it sounded. And then the other component in this that I find interesting and I am optimistic about is a flex schedule when it comes to permanent opponents. So, excuse me, we've seen the model of the 277, 177 or the 366 format or the 276, 267 model. So basically, folks, the SEC looked at this earlier this year and determined that they're staying with an 8-game schedule. The Big Ten has given us clues into what they're looking at. And more than clues, they basically laid out about a month ago that they're looking at 3 different scheduling models, whether there would be one determined permanent rival opponent for each school, whether there would be 3 permanent year-to-year rivals or permanent opponents, or that there would be a flex model, which I fully support, because I just don't believe that you can determine the same number of rivals for each school. And why tie yourself down to that? Northwestern has one legitimate rival in my eyes, and that's Illinois. Illinois, the same thing. USC and UCLA come in. Why force them into matchups with particular schools that they have nothing to do with currently? Let them play their rivalry. And so there was a comment made by Tony Petitti earlier this week that lent itself to believing that there would be this flex model instituted.
But again, in those 3 scenarios, I have to think back to that. Those 3 scenarios that were released, those 3 scenarios did not at the time guarantee no divisions, right? We're just talking about built-in rivalries that are kept year to year.
Well, if you think about it, they can't be modeled in any other way. They can't. If you have a division format of, let's say, 8 and 8, and you have a 366 model, you can't have a division structure. If you only have 3 permanent opponents, yeah, I follow your thought process that there could be a play in which you obviously play all your division opponents, but maybe you have permanent out of division rivals, but the math still doesn't work with the number of teams you would play from year to year. So that format, either one of those formats, lends itself to a non-division format?
Even with tiers, quads, or whatever you want to.
That's a good question.
You could do it with tiers, couldn't you? If you did it, is that
You
what we're
could do
calling
it,
them?
yes, with a pod
Pods.
system in which
Pods.
you've got 16 teams, 4 per
Yeah.
pod, and you play the other 3 teams.
But my guess is
Yes,
that's
within
not
your
based
pod.
on the based on what you're telling me, based on the language that's out there. My guess is that's not what's happening. So what it sounds like, I mean, early prediction wise, is you're going to have, like you said, and you're going to have one large conference. And I don't know if they'll go with the flex option, but I'm with you. I like that idea. Why try to generate rivalries that aren't there? Um, and yeah, I mean, it's going to be fascinating tomorrow, 3:30 Central, I believe, on BTN, and I plan on doing a live show probably right after that. I don't know how long their Big Ten live show is going to be on the Big Ten Network, but tomorrow we'll know. Like I know a lot of people who've loved to speculate on this stuff. I know you're one of those guys that I don't know that you love to speculate, but you kind of have to. You're in the business of some of this having to speculate on it, but I've kind of ignored it up until now because I'm just like, let's just see what happens. I don't really care to divulge into all the different possibilities, but this is going to really impact Iowa's future. I don't think there's any, I think I'm kind of just stating the obvious on that more than it impacts the future for Michigan or Ohio State. Um, Obviously, USC and UCLA joining the conference, that in and of itself is a huge change. But there's no way you're going to get away with a schedule like you got away with in 2021. That's just, you're not going to get those anymore, or 2015. My guess is you're not going to get those. Here's the other part that interested me, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but the announcement from the Big Ten today through the Big Ten Network, 24-25 Big Ten football scheduling model and opponents. So does that just mean the 24-25 season, or does that mean the 2024 season and the 2025 season? Of course, there's no Big Ten games played in that next year, right? The second half of the bowl season, basically, in January, even though that's considered the 24-25 season. You get what I'm saying? I'm wondering if that's going to be like, is that just indicating, hey, this is the 1 year schedule, and then we'll revisit this next year? It's not like they announced the future of Big Ten scheduling. This is just for 24-25. So we'll see.
That's a good question. I can't answer that for sure. I will say, just to kind of clarify for myself, I wouldn't say that I'm into speculation. I would call it more recommendations. I tend to make my recommendations and say, this is what I would do. This is how I would set up this conference in 16 teams, which I did. I did a 2-division split. I did a 4-pod split of 4 teams per pod, and I thought that worked out rather nicely. And I did, obviously, it's easy to unveil the 16 teams 1 through 16. I tend to give my recommendations. I don't speculate or try to predict what they're going to do, because I have no reason to try to make that prediction. But I do give my recommendation on what I would do.
So do you have a prediction for tomorrow?
My prediction is that they're going to go with a flex schedule, which that's
Okay.
something I've recommended for 10 years.
Yeah. Well, it'll be fascinating. My guess is what will happen. I don't know. You could be right. I hope you're right. My guess is the whole 24-25 thing. The reason that's, the language is that way. My guess is we'll get the model, the future model for the Big Ten Conference with this number of teams, because we also don't know what the future. I mean, we may add a couple more teams, and then you have to change things again, right? But you're gonna get a model moving forward, and opponents announced for the 24, basically the 24 season, and then maybe, hopefully that means, Mark, that we can not announce Big Ten schedules years in advance. Now we're doing this one over a year in advance, but we've talked about scheduling and announcements and all that, and trying to follow the NFL model. Maybe that's an indication that we'll get schedules on a year-to-year basis. That's the smart way to do this.
So for everyone following us here, think about it this way. Whether there is a flex system or there is a 3-6-6 system, I believe that Iowa is going to be tagged with Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Minnesota as their three permanent opponents. What has to be decided, to Corey's point, and to be unveiled would be, in addition to that, would be how is the rest of the conference for Iowa, for their scheduling purposes, how is the rest of the conference going to be divided into two 6-team quadrants? I would think that they're looking for very balanced groupings. Of course, they're not going to put Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State in one 6-team grouping for Iowa to have to play those three teams together every year, and then the other 6-team grouping is excessively easy. Of course, they're going to have to. It takes a lot of thought and a lot of puzzle pieces included to factor in the equity of the schedule for every team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and what if eliminating divisions, a big part of doing that is to make things more balanced, then why put yourself in a weird position as it relates to, especially because you don't know the future of the conference. We don't know if Oregon and Washington are joining, or maybe Notre Dame down the road. So yeah, it'll be a fun day. Hopefully I have a better voice by then, Mark, but I know you're going to be busy tomorrow, so
I'm going to be traveling, so I can't necessarily guarantee anyone that I'm going to have something to say immediately, but we will do our best. Erica, thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate you being here. Good evening, everyone. Please gently press the like button. That's important to Erica. Gently press the like button. Go Hawks. Also, any thoughts on who our next commit might be?
That's a good question. I'm assuming we're talking. Maybe she's not. Maybe she's not. I don't know. I think they're done in the portal for this season. I know they were in on the kid from UMass. Does not sound promising there.
Are we talking about the defensive back?
Yes.
There was a defensive back out of UMass, Josh. Can't think of his last name. He committed to Michigan today.
Okay, there you go.
That's who we're talking about.
I've been off social media most of the day, so there you go. So yeah, if he's going to Michigan, I doubt. I don't think Iowa has put a ton of chips in the defensive back pool, if you will. Like, I don't think Phil Parker went in headfirst to the portal. They have missed on several defensive backs, and that's sort of odd when you think about Phil Parker's reputation, Iowa defense's reputation. But I guess, when you think about it, if you're not putting a ton of interest, you're probably not asking that a lot of NIL opportunity. Again, I know that the NIL stuff is how that's divvied up is supposed to be based on what they can make, not what we're offering you as an athlete to come here. But my point is, my guess is there weren't a ton of NIL opportunities through the powers that be with the Iowa collective for the three guys they missed out on. The guy from Harvard, the guy from Rhode Island, the guy from UMass. If I'm missing someone else, someone could let me know. But those are the three guys that Iowa pursued. I know Phil Parker had an in-home visit with the kid from Harvard. I don't even know where he ended up. But all those guys picked other schools. I would think that's odd unless those other schools have something that Iowa doesn't have. And I don't know what it could be other than possibly NIL opportunity that Iowa didn't offer. I will say one more thing, Mark. We didn't mention this at the outset. We should. Terry Roberts is back in the portal. Did you see that?
I did not. No.
Interesting. I don't know what that means. I mean, I don't know. I'm assuming that just means he got beat out or something happened. I saw some people saying I should come back to Iowa. Man, I think I don't want to say those bridges were burned, but based on what I know, I don't know that. I think it would take quite a bit for Iowa to take him. I don't know if say take him back, but for both sides to be compliant enough to just say, yeah, come back. You missed spring ball because you up and left and went and wore the turnover chain for a few months. I think my guess is he'll end up somewhere else. I feel bad for him. He's a really talented, good athlete who I think had a chance to be an NFL guy. But I'm not saying he's got attitude issues, but if you're jumping around, I don't know. It would have been, in hindsight's 2020. Had he stayed at Iowa, he's probably got a good chance of starting this year.
For the record, the turnover chain has been abolished. It has been tucked away and put away. But
Okay.
yes, of course, you're referring to a Miami, longstanding Miami tradition. Uh, so we can get back to the schedule. If anyone has comments and questions, just leave them in the live chat. We will get to them concerning the schedule or, of course, the 23 season, whatever you've got there. I was going to play you I'm not going to play the audio, but I'll skip through because I don't have the list in front of me. But the Big Ten power rankings that I released, I believe, last week, and just get your impressions of where we stand with Iowa in particular. Let's see, where are the Hawkeyes? I've got
So this is
Iowa.
different than your program rankings, which we also looked at last week.
It is.
Okay.
They're the Hawkeyes at number 4 in the Big Ten.
Wow. And you got them at 8-5. You see, you're buying. This is what you're doing.
No,
You're
no, no,
buying.
no. They were 8-5 last year.
Okay.
I'm putting, yeah,
Okay.
their record from last season.
Are we listening to this, Mark? Or are we
No,
not?
we're not going to
Oh,
bore
okay.
everyone with. Well, no, I
I'm
just
gonna-
I didn't have the list in front of me, so I had to pull up the video just to find the
So who's ahead of them?
number.
Duh. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. Those
Yeah,
are the 3 teams ahead of them. And so you got them. See, you're different than a lot of the mainstream media because a lot of the mainstream sports media has Wisconsin clearly ahead of Iowa. At least, I mean, it seems like everybody has Wisconsin beating Iowa.
they do.
And Wisconsin seems to be the favorite to win this conference. I don't agree with that, the division. I don't agree with that at all. And I'm not trying to be some big sloppy homer. Don't you think Iowa is the favorite right now to win the division
Yes,
based on personnel? I mean, Wisconsin did well in the portal during this offseason. The brand new quarterback. I know he looked bad during spring practice. I don't read a whole lot into that, or the open spring practice, I should say. They did a lot of work in the portal. Brand new coaching staff, different system. It might work. Maybe they'll catch on right away and be great, but it might not. And if I'm banking on a team to win 9 or 10 games, I'd bank on the coach that's done it a number of times during his career at this institution with a quarterback who's won a Big Ten title and his favorite weapon at tight end, plus a Phil Parker-led defense that's good every single year and a special teams unit that's going to be as good as anybody. So you had Wisconsin right below Iowa, I'm assuming.
I don't know off the top of my head. I believe I did. I believe I had Wisconsin at 5. So my thought is that I think that Luke Fickell is a tremendous hire. I thought he was the hire of the off season. I think that he's going to do really good things. I
I do too.
hesitated. I almost went to great things, good things. He's going to do really good things at Wisconsin and return them to a place where they are, I believe, going to be on the high end of what they've been in the last 25 or 30 years. However, I just believe that there are some things to be worked out there, certainly. And I think the schedule favors Iowa.
Is it? I mean, I know he's done really good things at Cincinnati, great things at Cincinnati. Is it at all concerning to you what happened his 1 year at Ohio State?
No.
Why? Why is it that? Because Devil's advocate would look at that and say everybody else who coaches at Ohio State wins 9 to 12 games. How does a guy go 6-6?
9.
It's a fair question, right? Well, that's what I'm saying. He went 6-6, didn't he?
Who's the last? Yeah.
Yeah. When's the last time you guys? Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Don't you? That's not concerning to you at all.
Okay. There were circumstances there.
Okay.
So they had a scandal with Tattoo Gate. Jim Tressel got fired. They lost their top 5 offensive players, an offensive tackle who went to the NFL draft, their best running back, their best wide receiver, their quarterback, Terrell Pryor. Pryor just left the team and went to the NFL draft, went to the supplemental draft. The 4 other best offensive players they had were suspended for the first 5 games of the season. So that's difficult. Plus, just that was his first experience. Bill Belichick was not the coach that he became with the New England Patriots when he was first a NFL head coach, going 5-11 for the Cleveland Browns.
So my question to you, Mark, is based on what you know about football. If you were the interim coach at Ohio State, what would your record be for 1 year?
Well,
Both records.
considering they were 12-1 the year before and 12-0 the year after, I understand your point. It's
I'm just saying 6-6 is a huge drop. And you talk about, well, you lost your 5 best guys to the draft and you lost these 4 guys to suspension for the first half of the year. It almost feels like 6-6, even despite that, with the depth that Ohio State has created year after year, 6-6 has to be the floor for that
sure
kind
they
of talent.
lose those type of players every year.
Yeah.
I get your point. They were 12-1 the year before, and they were 12-0 the year after. So,
Yeah, I agree with you, though. I think I've said it before. I think he was the hottest coach on the market
yeah.
this past year. And I love the Matt Rule hire, to be quite frank. I think both those hires are really good. I think the conference is as strong as it's been. And frankly, even if the divisions weren't going away, I think the division in a couple of years is going to be a lot harder to win. So it changes regardless.
And also understand that Jim Leonard, their longtime defense coordinator, who was masterful in the position, is gone. That's like Iowa losing Phil Parker.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if who's the D coordinator at Wisconsin now?
That's a good
Fickle.
question.
Did he bring the
I
guy
should
over
know
from
this.
Cincinnati?
I think
Didn't
he.
they want Leonard back? Didn't they try to get him to come back?
Hmm, that sounds right, but I don't want to say for sure based on what I remember of the
Okay.
situation. That does sound right that they did want him back.
Yeah. So I'll be fascinated to see what happens at those two institutions, and Iowa's going to get those two schools moving forward anyways. So like the divisions are going away. It does not mean that Iowa is going to be able to slide past Wisconsin and Nebraska because, like you just said, those two schools should absolutely be. If you're going to have three, Iowa should have three. They should have three. Uh, they do have three rivals that are protected if you need them to be protected. And all three of those rivals have up and coming coaches. If you want to call PJ Fleck an up and coming coach, still, I know you love you some PJ Fleck, but
He's established.
he's established. He's got work to do. I don't think everybody in that fan base is sold on PJ. Hasn't won a division title since he's been there. That's a problem when you're looking at the strength of the West or the lack thereof, and you look at basically every other contender year in and year out in that division has won the division. The only other school that hasn't won the division, well, two schools, right? Illinois and Nebraska.
Yes.
And Illinois should have won it last year had they not, dropped a deuce. So, anyways, it's I know we're going off on a tangent, but it's June 7th. So,
Well, PJ Fleck, I understand your point because you're right. Since he arrived, Purdue's won the division, Northwestern's won the division twice. That does not look good for him. His team has been obviously much more consistent than those teams year to year, but has not had the 1 year breakthrough.
but if I'm a Minnesota fan, I'm probably more nervous about this scheduling change than
Oh, sure.
myself as an Iowa guy. And by the way, MFin says in the chat, as soon as PJ wins the West, he's going to leave for greener pastures. Well, he better do it this year because, like I say, you're probably not going to get this type of a schedule ever again. And you either win the Big Ten or you don't, right? I mean, you can get, I guess if we want to quantify getting to the Big Ten championship game, but I mean, it's going to be hard to get to the Big Ten championship game. I think that's the bottom line. You're going to see a lot of Ohio State and Michigan in the Big Ten championship game. I mean, is that fair, Mark? Does it say that we're probably going to see Ohio State and Michigan in the championship game together? If you had to look at the next 5 years, you'd safely bet at least 3 of the next 5 years. Would you do that?
Wow. That doesn't bode well for the conference. I don't think that's a good look for the conference. I'm
I
not
don't
saying
either.
you're not right, but
I don't either,
it's
but I think it's reality based
if
on recent results.
so based on you taking it in that direction, if those two teams are playing 3 out of 5 years, and let's say one or the other is in the game one of the other 2 years. So Ohio State makes it 4 out of 5, Michigan makes it 4 out of 5, and then the other, you're talking only 2 spots out of 10 go to Iowa, Wisconsin, USC.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, what if I'm not saying Minnesota couldn't. Well, what are their prospects to win the conference? Like in the foreseeable future, what are their prospects? And not winning the conference. And frankly, what are the prospects for Iowa to win the conference? I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like this is why I made we talked about the Brian situation last year and preparing for the future. This is why I'm more confident that maybe Wisconsin could get up into that level where they're consistently one of those two teams every few years that sneaks into the title game. But you better make a move, because if you just keep doing what you're doing, Penn State's going to have problems. Penn State, they're going to have issues getting into that title game because they haven't been able to beat those two powers consistently or really at all. So, it's just going to be interesting. I'd be interested to know. I saw Dave in the chat commented on Hayden. It made me, as I saw that chat, it made me think, I wonder what Hayden Fry, how he would approach this. And I'm not saying Kirk's just, kicking his feet back and not doing anything. I don't know what he's thinking, but doing behind the scenes. Maybe he plans to walk away after this year anyways. But I would just think you have to approach, you can't, I know Kirk has done this for years. You can't just approach this and say, well, it's business as normal, business as usual, and we're just going to put our head down and work. He has approached almost everything at Iowa that way. And in large part, it has been effective and it has worked. I remember last year, I think it was the Big Ten Media Days in July of last year. I could be wrong on this. The first day, I only watched the first day of that because I really don't care to listen to all the other coaches the second day. But you had, I think, 2 days for 14 coaches. Am I correct in saying that? So you had 7 coaches in one day?
Yes.
I believe, go back and watch that first day. I know you won't do that, but go back and watch that first day. I believe Kirk was the only one who was not asked his thoughts about USC and UCLA joining the conference. Do you remember me saying that?
Yes.
And I thought it was very odd, and I thought it was very unfortunate. And that's one thing that maybe he's been asked. I watch if I'm not at a press conference, which I'm not at most, I go to media days, whatever. I'm going to ask him in August, because I want to know the answer to what are your thoughts on all this change? We've heard his thoughts on NIL and the transfer portal. But what's interesting is every coach that I can recall from last year that I listened to comment on that said good things about USC and UCLA joining the conference. And whether they felt that was the truth or not, they said the politically correct thing. It's good for the conference. It's helping us with revenue, et cetera, et cetera. Kirk hates going out west. He knows it's going to hurt him competitively. He's also the dean of college football in this conference, so it's not like he has to spew nonsense that maybe younger guys and coaches in this conference feel the need to do, right? You see what I'm saying? Like, I think if he had been asked that question, I don't think he would have said, I think it's great. I think it's great for the conference. No, he wouldn't have said that. But we never got to know because nobody asked him the question. That's my fault for not being a Big Ten Media Days, I guess. But
I'll have to get into the ears of my Ohio State and Michigan guys that go to the Big Ten Media Days to see if one of them will ask.
Please do that. That'd be a perfect. That is actually better than me asking about Iowa Media Days, because I think Iowa Media Days should be Iowa based. And, Big Ten Media Days, it's a perfect time. All this change, and we're going to get this announcement here about a month and a half before Media Day. By the way, when is Big Ten Media Day or days?
I don't know offhand. It's typically near it's usually like a Wednesday, Thursday, or Thursday, Friday affair, something like that, near the end of the month of July.
Yeah. No,
so I'll look it up.
Yeah.
But by the way, just to answer one of our earlier conjectures, and I should have been able to come up with this name, that's why it was killing me. And it fit right into our conversation talking about Luke Fickell and his performance at Ohio State in 2011. His defensive coordinator is one Mike Tressel, who is the son of Jim Tressel, the coach that Luke Fickell both replaced, and of course was on staff as defensive coordinator. Yeah.
Erica, can we address this question that Erica just threw up in the chat? Why is everyone so into Brett Bielema? I don't get it. I don't know. That's an interesting question. Erica must not be into Brett Bielema. I think he's fabulous.
Of course, I was going to say, similar to me touting PJ Fleck. You're a Brett Bielema guy, and I am as well, but maybe not to the same extent.
I'm higher on Brett than I am on PJ. Are you not? I mean, Brett has proven himself a lot more than PJ has.
He's had more opportunity.
How long has PJ been at Minnesota?
2017.
So he's been here. They've been there for 5 seasons. I mean, is that 6 seasons?
What program was Brett Bielema handed versus what program was PJ Fleck handed?
Well, let's not forget that Minnesota was not in a great place in, let's see, 20. Minnesota wasn't bad. 20. Think, what were they in 2016?
Jerry Kill was there and did a decent job. He had
Tracy
physical
Claeys?
issues. Pardon me?
That wasn't Claeys? Tracy Claeys?
Oh, Tracy Claeys after Jerry Kill.
Yeah, I think that was Claeys, wasn't it, in 16? Maybe 15 was Kill's last year. The reason I bring that up is because it's not like that program was in the dumps. And
no, but it wasn't Wisconsin.
No, it wasn't.
No.
But I'm just saying, Brett is a guy who's won at a high level. Yes, he's had more opportunity, and he has resurrected the Illinois. Based on last season, he's resurrected that program, and a lot of coaches have failed to make that program successful, including Lovie Smith, who was a proven NFL guy. And I think there's more to it than just Lovie Smith's a great coach. But my point is, I think Brett's fantastic. I'd love for him to be a coach at Iowa someday. I'd love that.
Yeah, he is more proven. I'll agree with that than PJ. I think it's a pretty comparable comparison. I think they're in the same tier. But yeah, so that's the deal, Erica. That Brett Bielema won big at Wisconsin. He won 3 consecutive Big Ten championships. Went to 3 consecutive Rose Bowls. So even though that is Wisconsin and they've been a strong program, that's their ceiling, and he lifted them to that ceiling. They haven't been, I'm not saying that they haven't been that good under Barry Alvarez, under Gary Anderson, and Paul Chryst at times, but they've never been better than that. So
I think part of the reason I'm a little bit partial toward Brett Bielema over someone like PJ. I don't know PJ personally. There have been mixed reports about how players view him, right? Is that fair? There was some reports last year that you probably brushed over and just ignored because you have a crush on PJ. But my point is, there have been mixed reviews. Brett Bielema is a great dude. I mean, I know that just not only based on you hear him talk, but what Don Patterson has said about him. He's just a good guy. And, you know, he bleeds black and gold. He's a Hawkeye. He's got the Hawkeye tattoo, I think, in his leg. So he's just a good guy. And I felt bad. I felt really bad for him last year with the way that season ended, because I think they're the best team in the division. And I think you agreed with me. I think they were the best team in the division. And it was unfortunate, the series of circumstances that occurred with Brett's personal life and the schedule, having to go to Michigan and competing with Michigan better than any other team really did there. And, you know, it cost them the division.
Michigan was certainly a much better team, but on that day, they were as good, if not better than Michigan. It would have been fascinating to see them 2 weeks later, after taking Michigan to the wire, to the final play of the game in the Big House, to have to rematch them. That would have been intriguing.
Do they get Michigan this year? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. So Erica says, yeah, Brett had one good season at Illinois. I don't hate him or anything, but I think he has to prove himself more at Illinois. Yeah,
Wasn't it his second year?
Yes.
He got hired it was his second year. So he had one good season at Illinois, Erica, but it was in his second year. A program that's been a dumpster fire for how long?
Even his first season was drastically improved. They beat Minnesota. They beat Penn State his first year.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good coach. He's really good.
And believe me, Mark, if he goes out and wins, say he wins the division this year when no one nobody's got Illinois winning the division. with the loss of Tommy DeVito and the transfer
Chase
portal attrition,
Brown. Yeah.
Chase Brown, the Witherspoon, the
Yeah.
DB,
Devin Witherspoon, who almost won the Thorpe Award. Yeah.
with all that loss and all that attrition, nobody's predicting them to win the division. If they somehow won the division this year, my guess is he would be right at the top of top candidate lists across the country. Like, he would be a coveted guy. And I don't know that he would leave for a big job like he did when he went to Arkansas, but he would be up there because he's not that old of a guy. And boy, to resurrect a program like that and have 2 of 3 years be really, really good. And I also think, I mean, when did he get hired? He got hired late 2020. Am I correct
Yes.
in saying that? That's a hard time to start a new job and to start a transition back into the college football world. And let's think back to how different recruiting was during that time period. There were some, and then you're talking about starting a new job at a program, not only that struggled, but now you've got the portal, which could help you. I think has helped him to an extent. The changing world with the portal and NIL and all these things. That was an odd time to take over a program and to get him back on the map as quickly as he did. That's just impressive. And it's not like it was a fluke that, well, they're beating Iowa and Iowa was trash. And they, as you said, they pushed Michigan better than anybody else did last year. I think they deserve to win this division. Purdue went to the Big Ten championship game and got spanked. So, I would say I think you got to give Brett credit. If he's out there again, I understand what Eric is saying, 1 year, but if he does it again this year, there are going to be a lot of people knocking on his door.
Going back to our forecast of what this conference could look like in Indianapolis for the next 5 years or so, we should put ourselves on record as predicting what schools are going to show up how many times in the next 5 years. And we will put that in a time capsule. YouTube will do that for us.
Okay. We hope YouTube does that for us.
Very good. Appreciate you all being here. We typically do this every Tuesday at 4:30 Central, where it counts 5:30 Eastern, talking Hawkeyes football. Of course, we are just about 2 months and 2 weeks away from the beginning of college football season. So we are roughly 10 weeks away. Oh, the number's got to be larger than that. I saw less than 100 days a couple weeks ago. So we're in the 85-day range, something like that.
And by the way, here's why I'm glad I'm sick now. Because I don't get sick very often, Mark. Usually I get sick like once or twice a year at the most. There have been years where I haven't gotten sick at all. But the fact that I'm sick now is probably an indicator that I won't be sick when it counts. Like I said, this time of year, I love the weather out, but it's not a real busy time of year. Once we hit August, things really start ramping up. It's not a time you want to be under the weather. So do we want to address the D-Rock comment here, the question in the chat, Mark?
Well, what do we have from D-Rock? Let's see.
When do we think Kirk will step down or retire? Care to weigh in on that? I've weighed in on it recently. I would not be shocked given the landscape and the Gary Barta announcement. I wouldn't be shocked if Kirk walks away after this season. I think more so not necessarily the Gary Barta announcement, but the announcement we're going to get tomorrow, the additions of USC and UCLA, NIL, transfer portal, all that.
Yeah, I would like to be a contrarian. I would like to argue with Corey on this point, but as I say consistently, sometimes my recommendations or my predictions are outlandish, or some people think, and sometimes they're extremely boring. But I always tell you the truth, or what the truth appears to be from my perspective. And if I had to, so I would not be surprised if Kirk Ferentz turns out to be another Nick Saban and just wants to continue on and just enjoys it and all of that. Wouldn't shock me. However, if you're going to press me into a prediction, I do see, like you, a number of these signs lining up. Favorable schedule in 2023, moving into a non-division format in 24, NIL, Although I would say, based on feedback from you and other sources, that it's been moved on and has progressed better than at one point that we determined, but
Yeah,
maybe still not being something that he wants to deal with on a regular
exactly.
basis.
Exactly. He's been more progressive about it than he was at the beginning, and I think a lot of people anticipated. However, you're right. He doesn't want the deal. He would rather not deal with the portal, and they've done very well in the portal this year. They've lost guys, but they've landed guys. Partly because of NIL, but part of it's because they've been willing to adapt. And I give them credit for that. Last year, they took one guy in the portal, and he was a third string tight end. Maybe you could argue a fourth string tight end. So they couldn't do that. They were forced to do it, but they did it. I give them credit for that.
And we've seen this out of other coaches. Urban Meyer comes to mind, and despite all of his character flaws, otherwise, he did want to put Ohio State. He did have the love of the university, and as an Ohioan who had worked on the staff under other Ohio State coaches, Earl Bruce, and I think Kirk Ferentz even more so wants to put this program in a position to flourish and to win and to proceed on into the future without him in a good place. So that's probably why he has been more active in the portal, been more active in understanding of NIL and that importance going forward.
By the way, you were listing the criteria that leads you to believe this could be the end of the Kirk Ferentz era at the end of the season. Couple notes. A, he did sign a contract through 2029. That's walking away from a lot of money. That's fair, right? But second thing, here's a reason why. Here's a reason you missed as to why he may choose to step away. Who's the one person besides the Gary Barta that could have an impact on that?
His son.
His son. He's got this weird contract that's in place that was built by the AD that's no longer going to be the AD on August 1st. And it's got criteria that if he doesn't meet the criteria, even though it's incredibly outlandishly weak criteria, if he doesn't meet it, then his contract will be terminated. That doesn't mean he'll be fired, but his contract will be terminated according to the language of the clause. So like that's another part of this that lines up with everything else. So, and maybe Brian comes out, like we said last week, maybe Brian comes out and puts out a top 50, top 40 offense. And if he does, I'm with you. I think I asked you this question last year. What would you say, or what would you do if he put out a top 50 offense? And basically to sum up what you said, you would not anoint him as the next great offensive coordinator in this sport, but based on the data we have, you would think that's probably the outlier, and that's probably the exception to the rule. He's built up a lot of negative reputation. He's got a number of years of good production to make up for all the years of bad. So, it's not like I'll be anointing him if he ends up, getting a top 40, top 50 offense. It's not like I want to be the next head coach. In fact, I don't know if there's anything he could do at this point, Mark, to convince me as an Iowa fan to embrace him as the next head coach. When he took over as offensive coordinator, there were a lot of people, including myself, that were open to that idea because we felt like that was what Kirk was suggesting and what he wanted. And I'm sure it's still what he wants, but we've went too far into this. And that's another reason why I think it would have served both parties well if they had split after 2021. Not after last year, after 2021. But last year sent the relationship between Brian and the fans so far into the ground. I just don't know if that can ever be fully repaired. And that's not necessarily Brian's fault. Part of that, I think, is the discrimination suit that was open that prevented him from getting an NFL job, even if he wanted one. Part of it is his dad maybe not doing what he should be doing, and part of it is his direct supervisor, Gary Barta, not doing what he needed to be doing in regards to the whole situation. So
I don't blame Brian Ferentz for his job status. He wants to be the offensive coordinator at Iowa, and
exactly.
that's what he is allowed to do. I blame him for a bad offense.
Sure, but the people in part, I blame him for a bad offense. But if he's not qualified, he's proven that he's not qualified, then it's his supervisor's job to say we have to get somebody else in here, right? We've played this game. We've talked about response.
Absolutely. It's not his responsibility.
But like people last year who said, "Oh, why doesn't he just step down?" I love the people who literally, we had Iowa media members asking him, "Have you considered stepping down?" Come on. Like there are questions you can ask, and then there's questions that are stupid to ask. What's he going to say? Yes, I thought about it. I thought about it, but I changed my mind. My wife talked me out of it. Like,
Yes.
come on.
I'm making $1 million a year. I decided not
Yeah.
to.
He's going to walk away from $1 million a year without a job. I mean, like, would he be able to get a job somewhere? Sure. How much of a pay cut would he have to take to get a job? Let's assume the racial discrimination suit prevented him from getting an NFL job. By the way, that suit is settled now. So if he was back on the market, he might be hireable at the NFL level now. But assuming he wasn't,
I don't even know if he could get if you think about his qualifications, I don't know that he could get a group of 5 offensive coordinator job. Why would you hire him?
No, I'm not. I don't think he could. I don't think he could. But
He'd be an offensive line coach somewhere.
He could go get I think he could have a shot at getting an offensive line or running backs or tight ends coaching position at a Power 5 program. I don't know why he wouldn't be. He coached tight ends with Bill Belichick, whether that was fair or not. They had good results, when he was the tight ends. I'm just saying, what would the average, like, if Brett Bielema said, "Hey, Brian, come over and coach tight ends," what would he be making? 500,000, 400,000?
If that. Yeah, something in that range.
So you're talking about maybe taking basically a 50% cut in your pay. That's I mean, I don't think anybody in their right mind would do that.
Yeah.
Performance-wise aside.
And I'm going to take a wild guess that nobody in the chat's making either 500 or $1 million per year. However, so it seems like, oh, well, $500,000. But when you make that kind of money, then you have a certain lifestyle that you've created based on how much money you make. And regardless, that's a difficult hit.
Great point. I love, and we're all guilty of it. I think you are a common man, Mark. Is that fair to say? You're not Rush Limbaugh. So my point is, like, if you're just your average Joe, right? You and I are what you consider your average Joe. It's easy for us to look at a situation like that and say, "Well, what, 400,000? I can't imagine what I'd do with 400,000." But you're right. Brian's got, as basically anybody, most people who are making that amount of money every year, they have penciled themselves into a lifestyle that if you bump yourself down to 400,000, that is going to hamper that lifestyle and cause problems.
That's one of the great reasons why, and it's a great documentary, that NBA players in particular, other athletes as well, but NBA players go broke, is because they land a big contract and they adjust their lifestyle to making 18 million a year. And then they're suddenly making 3 million a year for the last 5 or 6 years of their, and they can't handle that. They can't adjust.
If I was a millionaire, Mark, all right, and I lived a
You're working on
it. And I lived an average Joe's lifestyle.
Yes.
Right? Blue collar lifestyle. That money, you take a pay cut from $1 million to 400,000. Big deal. I assume it's just all going into the bank and you're just accruing interest. I don't know, but I guess you and I can only imagine what that's like to have that type of an income. But I just don't think we really, none of us, I'm not trying to defend Brian. I think for the people that think it's just so easy for him to step down, or should have been easy for him to step down, I think that's foolish.
Well, you're also asking in a public setting, you're basically forcing that individual to admit that they're doing a bad job and they should be fired. That they should be removed from their position, whether they make the decision or not. And that's also humbling to a degree. And regardless of how poor of a job he's done, I don't want to see him have to make that kind of statement. He's not responsible for his employment. So James is asking my top 3 candidates for the Iowa job, and we'll keep this realistic.
We've done this before, by the way.
Absolutely. And Corey's more qualified to answer this question. But for me, and let's keep in mind that just about anyone who gets a high-profile job in college football these days is already dutifully employed that this is the way it's working these days. People are getting just hired away from jobs. We've seen, not to belabor the point, but we have seen fairly high profile coordinators this offseason skip a job, meaning that they coach for a particular team in 2022. Then they got hired away and they coached because they didn't do much coaching for 2 or 3 weeks, and then they got hired to another position and left that school in the off season. I don't know how ethical that is, but my three would be, the first three that come to mind are Bob Stoops, Mark Stoops, and Brett Bielema. And in order of my preferences, it would go Bielema, Mark Stoops, Bob Stoops. Not that Bob Stoops is not the better of the three all time. I just kind of believe in disengagement from the sport, and fire in the belly may be lacking slightly.
Well, if there's not fire in the belly, then why would he take the job? I don't think he's taking the job unless he's got fire. I guess that's what
Could be. Yeah.
I would still probably put Bob as the number one candidate, even though I know it's funny when you have an opinion on these things and people think it's not practical, they just laugh. So I don't care. If Kirk steps away at the end of this year, I'm going to be calling for Bob Stoops to be a candidate. I don't care what people say. Like, he should be a candidate. He's not too old to take the job.
Sure.
He's an Iowa guy. Brad Bielema should be a candidate. For me, it wouldn't be Mark. Mark would not be on my top three. Phil Parker would be in my top three. I think you have to at least look at Phil and talk to him. Maybe you talk to Phil first. With what he's given to the program, I don't know that you call Bob right away. I think maybe you look at Phil and say, hey, what's your interest level? How many years do you have left? Do you want to do this? And maybe he doesn't want to. And if he doesn't want to, you say, hey, if this is Beth Getz or whoever's the next AD, if we bring in someone that you have a relationship with, I'm sure he's got somewhat of a relationship with Bob Stoops. If we bring in Bob, or we bring in Mark, or we bring in Brett, would you give us a few more years? Because I think if they bring in somebody who doesn't have connection to the program, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. What reason does Phil Parker have to stick around at that point? I think that's got to be a factor as well. If you have an idea of how long Phil wants to stick around, hire with some sort of a aim at keeping him around. I think that is a factor. It's not just about connections to Kirk and to Iowa. It should be connections to one of the best coordinators in the country. LeVar Woods is not in my top. No, LeVar Woods is not in my top three. He's never called plays. He's never been a play caller. Now, maybe he goes somewhere and is a successful play caller, and I'm sure there are anecdotal examples where you can find special teams coaches jumping to head coaching jobs and being successful. But based on the resumes of all those guys we just rattled off, Mark, I'm not taking LeVar Woods over any of them. And I like LeVar Woods. Don't get me wrong. I hate to lose LeVar Woods. And honestly, he's young enough, Mark, that if they hired someone else, he's probably going somewhere else. That'd be my guess. They probably will lose LeVar if they hire someone else. But that's just the nature of the game. Now, I mean, is he qualified to coach offense? Could he be the next OC and you have Phil as the DC and Bob is your head coach, or Brett's your head coach, and you find a special teams coach? I don't know, maybe. But that's my thought on LeVar Woods. And I like LeVar Woods. He's done a fabulous job at this institution. Everybody wants to tout Phil Parker, but let's talk about what LeVar Woods has done. And by the way, Mark, we've talked about it, and I don't think there's probably anybody else on your panel that throws special teams out as much as I do, because as an Iowa guy, you have to, right? How can you avoid talking about punting? But the bottom line is, like, there are, for me, and maybe this is knock on wood, maybe I'm going to regret saying this, I don't have any concerns about special teams. And with Caleb Brown coming here, you've got Cooper DeJean and Caleb Brown as return guys. Caleb Johnson returned kicks last year, although kick returning is so overrated now in this day and age of college football. You've got maybe the best punter in the country in Torrey Taylor. And Mark, I'll say this, shout out to Drew Stevens, maybe the best place kicker in the country. Maybe the best place kicker in the country. I can tell you, what did I see the other day? Let me find this. You can see if I can find the quote here. He was, I believe Drew was down in Florida this past weekend for an event that featured like the top 15, top 20 best kickers in the country, minus like one or two. and Drew won that event based on what I was told, and was almost perfect. Almost perfect. Went 15 of 15 Friday, 14 of 15 on Saturday, 14 of 15 on Sunday, and made a new personal record, 66 yards, 66-yard field goal down in Florida. I know that's not a whole lot when you're, I shouldn't say, I know that's, people, there's no line. 66 yards, that's a big kick, Mark. That's a big kick. And he's got that type of a leg. And with his level of accuracy, like, he's going to be one of the best kickers in the country this year.
Well, to your point, if that was some guy on YouTube producing videos that kicked the ball 66 yards, then I would say that's great. He can really kick, but yeah, there's no line and there's no crowd. Well, this guy does it with the line and the crowd anyway. He just hasn't had the opportunity from 66 yards, but we know he is one of, if not the best kicker in college football.
And he's going to be one of, I know this is maybe going on a limb. He was a true freshman last year. He's going to be one of the best kickers in Iowa history if he sticks it out. And I have reason to believe he will. That's a big statement because we've had a lot of really good kickers even of late. You think about Marshall Kane, and you think about Caleb Shudak and
Nate Kading,
Duncan, Nate Kading, Miguel Racinos. He's got an opportunity to be right up there with Nate as far as he's got the leg to be an NFL kicker and the accuracy. Marshall Kane had the leg. Let's not forget the 57-yard game-winning field goal against Pitt in the final seconds. He's got the leg, but he also missed extra points quite a bit. So, like, it's hard. I mean, you talk about a kid who has that level of accuracy with that type of leg. That's hard to find, and Drew's got both. That's impressive.
We have 2 super chats to catch, and we appreciate everybody being here again. It's typically Tuesday at 4:30 Central, so make it on back and bring some friends with you next week. And Corey's going to be live on, I'm losing track of my days, on Thursday as well. Erica, thank you so much for that. Too bad Beth can't rip up BF's contract. And again, Erica, I know that you love LeVar Woods and the work that he's done, but to compare he and Brett Bielema for the head coaching position, you'll take Brett Bielema, believe me. And one more note on Brian Ferentz, as we were discussing, I will neither be rooting for Iowa football this year nor be rooting against Iowa football this year. What I will be rooting for is that 25 point per game total to be teetering on the edge as the season draws to a close. As Iowa goes to its final game against Nebraska, as they go to their final game in a bowl game, for that 25 points just to be teetering on the edge.
By the way, I'm going to start doing this. It's June, man. Time is flying by. I'm seeking a sponsor for the Brian Ferentz points per game tracker. All right.
Love it.
We are going to get a sponsor for this, and we are going to. My goal is to have this up on the post game show every Saturday. So, if you have a small business, I think it's great, Mark. And it wasn't my idea. Somebody else threw this idea.
Oh, that's great.
It's fantastic.
And it's inspired me. So, but that's great. That's all yours, of course. That's your deal. You are Mr. Hawkeye. I in no way ever cross those lines. I always give deference to Corey's work. If you want the best in Iowa Hawkeyes coverage, football, baseball, basketball, head on over to From the Hawkeye of the Storm. I just get Corey once a week, and so we try to do the best show we can every Tuesday with all of you.
And as I said earlier, apologize to anybody who is like, well, why isn't he putting out content? Nobody wants to hear my nasal voice when I'm sick. And again, there's not a ton out there right now. By the way, Brian, thank you for this. And I love the picture for Brian is I think it's one of our shirts. What's the upside? I love it. That's fabulous.
So, yes, Brian is asking, any news on Grant Nelson, and do we know if Beth Getz has been in contact with Brad Heinrichs?
I'm not aware of Beth being in contact with Brad Heinrichs. Grant Nelson's a basketball-related question mark. I can answer it. Based on what I've been told, Brian, it's not good. So I don't expect the Grant Nelson. I hope what I've been told is not true, but I don't think Grant Nelson will be attending Iowa next year, even though I'd love for him to.
I too will be a little light on content over the next few days. I just took about 4 or 5 days off, and we'll be doing the same here starting early tomorrow morning. But I don't know, throw the phone in front of my face when I look at these Big Ten scheduling formats coming up. Cole, thank you so much for the super chat as well. Big Ten announcing 2024 opponents tomorrow. Cole, thanks for joining us. Yes, we've been discussing that. We typically have the most viewers on this show and pretty much all the shows at the conclusion. So please check out the remainder of the show that you missed, and it will post immediately. Cole, thank you so much for that. Erica coming back with the average needs to be 24.4. Bye-bye BF.
Well, there's a little clause in the contract, Erica, that you don't know about that says they round up.
I think that's where she was going with that. She's right there with you.
I know, but if they 24.1, they're going to round up. So, even if it's not 24.5, they're going to round up regardless.
Oh, I just hope that that's just teetering on that. That will be so much fun.
I hope that. What they average last year? 17. Am I right in saying that?
They had to average more than that. I think the offense averaged 17.
Well, they lost Kayvon Merriweather and Riley
only
Moss. Both those guys were
There's
solid.
no way they only averaged 17 points a game as a team.
Oh no, I think that's all they averaged. Should we ask Google? Should I ask Google?
I think it was right around 25, but we figured, I remember us doing this and figuring out that the offense averaged about 17 and the defense averaged the other 7 or 8.
No. Mark, keep in mind, let me find the numbers here.
They only scored 6 against Illinois, and
I can find this. Somebody will probably find it before I do.
Well, yeah,
it's easy
to find.
It was 15 or 16.
I'll just go to last season's standings. The point total is going to be right there. So you've got Iowa scored 230 points in 13 games.
Yeah, I'm seeing.
You're right. That's under 20. 13 times 20 is 260. So they scored under 20 per game.
Yeah, I'm showing.
Oh my word!
I'm showing 18.6. That doesn't sound.
No, sure it does.
I was thinking it was 17. Maybe
they scored 230. Oh, I got 17.7. 230 divided by 13.
I don't know what I'm looking at.
They scored 230, and they played 13 games.
Huh. Interesting. I don't know why this site.
Oh my word!
Let me go to. Let me. This is the NCAA site. What do they say? Yeah, they say 17.7.
Yeah,
17.7 points per game. That includes the defense.
Yeah, which his total is going to include the defense too.
Correct. That's why I say when you said 17 without the defense, there's no way that's the case, because then you're looking at, you already achieved that last year. if that was the criteria.
Ohio State averaged 44.3.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they led the nation in scoring. They were close. I don't know that they were number one, but man, they didn't score. Okay. Fun stuff with all of you. We appreciate you being here again. Megan, I'm back next Tuesday at 4:30 Central, and Corey has yet to announce, I believe, when you're going live with the schedule release.
My plan is to try to be live tomorrow right after the Big Ten live show, which is at 3:30 Central. So I have to look to see how long that show is going to be. If it's an hour, hour and a half hour, I have no idea. So plan on being here late afternoon, early evening tomorrow, and we'll chat it up.
All right, Corey, thank you so much for doing this as always, and we'll see everybody next week. Join Corey from the Hawkeye of the Storm on Thursday.